us from Helsinki this
No,
evening.
no problem.
So you are running Think Global School, which is one of the more innovative, forward-thinking schools that I've ever come across. On the surface, I think a lot of people see it as being a teen tour school, and man, it is anything but that. And you are rethinking so many aspects of education. It's one of the reasons we wanted to talk to you. And so I'm just curious, like, just to start off and frame a little bit about where you're coming from. What is some of that thinking and those philosophies that drive a program that's as innovative as yours?
Well, I actually think, Michael, it's a combination of good practice from prior to World War One being fully implemented in a way that hasn't been implemented before. So if we talk about the roots of education, that is really important to us at Think Global School. We're talking about Montessori, we're talking about John Dewey, we're talking about all these key thinkers that really valued the autonomy, the initiative, the value of students directing their own learning and actually learning not through sitting in a classroom, but actually learning through experiential education. And so if you look at John Dewey, you look at John Holt, you look at Montessori, all those things, they really value the learner. And it's all the things that we've talked about in the last 50 to 60, 70 years about constructivist thought and building on what kids know. But really, what we find and what I've seen in the last 25 years is that a lot of institutions have a really hard time turning or operationalizing. They all say they're student-centered, but they have a really hard time sometimes operationalizing it. And then we look at, how school reform's path over the last 25 years, ever since, School at Risk was published in 1980 by Reagan and the group saying that, we're behind on everybody. We're looking at actually, what you assess is what you will teach. And how you assess is how you will teach. And how we focused on assessment in the last 20 to 30 years is all about rote memory, rote memorization. And so we're assessing those kind of skill qualities. And what I find intriguing about being in education right now in the 21st century is we're on the precipice of an amazing change from the information age to what some people are calling the smart machine age, and what effect that's going to have, not just on education, but actually on society in general and how we work and how we make our living and how we interact with the world. And all those things are kind of like bubbling to a head. But yet, if you look at most of the educational institutions that we have, they're still stuck in the 20th century learning pedagogies. And that troubles me in a lot of ways. And so, while we are really cool and that we go to all these different countries, it's the pedagogy that I think really should inspire people, that is totally transferable to any level, from kindergarten all the way to college level. It's like, how are we creating learners, changing how we assess them, changing how we require excellence from them, which is really transforming, I think, how our students are being educated at Think Global School, and how it could apply to other schools that are questioning those practices in their own classrooms. Is what we did for the last 50 years really good enough for the next 50 years? Shoot, the way technology is going, is it good enough for the next 10 years?
Well, you reminded me of a story in the book, The Second Machine Age, where they talk about, right? They talk about how computing power has been growing exponentially. And if you look at a chessboard as a demonstration of it, and the story they tell is that the person who invented chess was given an award, and his award, he could pick whatever he wanted. And what he chose was 1 grain of rice doubled for every square on the board. And at 32nd to the 33rd square, the numbers started getting all silly. And it would, if you followed it to the end, it would be more rice than has ever been grown in the history of the planet. And that our technology is growing in a similar way. and that we are on that 32nd square, ready to tip over into that 33rd. And we don't know what that's going to mean for society yet.
Exactly. So on my flight to Helsinki from London today, I had the New York Times with me, and all the news is about Las Vegas. But buried in the middle of the page was an article about Taiwan. And Taiwan right now has the first public bus that is driverless on the Taiwan University campus. It's gone through all the trials. And I kept telling people in my hometown, I was like, look, what are we going to do when 49 million Americans don't have jobs in the transportation services in the next 5 years?
Yep.
With all those people who don't have jobs. And so I'm working on this piece where I'm like, initially in the last 50 years, we've been educating our kids to be passive receptacles of knowledge, or we've asked them to recall matter. And that is no longer good enough. That our kids with a smartphone can answer any kind of old-fashioned question. Shoot, I can put in a complex math problem, story problem into Google, and I can get the answer in 5 seconds of what that is. So the question really becomes is like, what is the end goal for our students nowadays? What do we want? What are those skills as educators we really want them to master? And I don't think it's serious. I still think we're stuck in that math and reading are the things that we want them to master. That's what we still pay millions of dollars in the United States to measure as math and reading scores. But is that really what we want our kids to master? Is that really the important thing that they need to have the exit out? And so I think there's this famous book called Sacred Cows Make the Best Burgers. You know what I mean? And I think education right now is ripe for some burger making. I think there's some sacred cows that need to be slaughtered. And I think we need to start questioning things. And I think we really need to start looking, not in the next 50 years what kids will need, but in the next 5 years what the kids are going to need. And I think TGS, thank God, Think Global School is actually engaging in themselves in really looking at that. So if we just look at assessment, most of the time in traditional schools, teachers go and do assessment, and they do their summative assessments that they have in their classroom, and they're disjointed from other disciplines, and they don't talk to each other across subject lines at the high school level. There's no collaboration going on. And what I witnessed, perhaps for the first time in education in a long time, is at the end of our first term in Botswana with this new project-based learning curriculum, which is multidisciplinary, which is really student-focused. I saw 6 teachers with 6 different disciplines sitting in a circle talking about one kid, and they would spend 20 minutes on each kid. And then they would write up this narrative report of how this kid has grown from week 1 to week 6. That doesn't happen. And the response that we got from parents about that, we knew their kid, where their weaknesses were, where their strengths were, where they improved, where they could show some growth opportunities, that was discussed in this 4-page narrative report that we sent home to the parents. And they were ecstatic. They're like, you guys really get our kids. And we're like, yeah, we get our kids.
And what's driving that narrative? Is there a structure to it? Are you aligning the feedback and the observations to specific skills that you want students to be demonstrating?
Yeah.
Because
so
one of the things we both do is we have kids do public demonstrations of understanding, right? And it's not just standing up doing a presentation. It's applying their work in a real meaningful way. So within that framework, what are the teachers looking for?
Yeah, so what we've identified, we spent a year looking at learning targets. We looked at specific learning targets of content that we thought was relevant for the 21st century. And then we looked at specific learning skills, 21st century learning skills that we thought were equally relevant, and they both get equal weight. So before a project begins, we look at a project and we say, okay, what are the end goals for this project? What do we want our kids to be able to demonstrate after this? How do we want them to grow? So every one of these targets, we assess the kids as either they're a novice, meaning they're brand new at it, and they can't do it by themselves. They need teacher intervention, or they need teacher support to achieve the standard. A specialist level is where they can pretty much do it on their own with very little teacher intervention, and they just have to demonstrate the excellence. Or at the mastery level, where they become masters in it, that they can either create their own new work, or actually they can actually instruct others. And so if you look at old school world or old world things, is that an apprentice in a guild needed a lot of mastery help. A specialist or a journeyman was able to go out on their own and ply their trade, and some were better than others, but they were able to do most of their work without any help from the master. And then a master was able to actually instruct the journeyman and actually to instruct the students. And so we break down each target, each skill like that. And so when we talk to these kids, we're like, look, you still needed a lot of input from us to be able to achieve this. You're still at the novice level. And that's a different kind of conversation than most kids are used to having. Most kids are used to having is like, oh, I got an A, a B, a C, a D, or if you're on the point scale, a 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, whatever. But being able to talk to a kid and say, look, you needed me more than others did. And that's okay. That's your growth and development over time. And then we break down within that level. As a novice, did you give me your most excellent work? And we have a conversation with the students like, okay, what would excellent work look like at your level? And they give us a narrative, which is totally different than how traditional assessment goes.
Yep. And I love you talking about the apprenticeship model. And so I'm curious, in a traditional apprenticeship model, you are going through those phases in a specific discipline, right? Like you're learning how to be but in a school, we're trying to teach them to not to be some, that specific thing, but each school might be growing their students and moving them through so that they are demonstrating what we want, right? Like what you want a TGS graduate to be. Like we have one for GOA. Like we know that when a GOA student finishes their course, we want them to be able to demonstrate these 6 competencies. Is there a unique fingerprint for TGS?
And so that's somewhat where we differ, is that we have learning targets and we have these mastery skill targets in the 21st century. And we recognize that kids come as individuals and each individual has a mastery or a passion. And so what we try to point out to kids is like, okay, look, there's no way you're going to be a master in every one of these targets. Not going to happen. What we want you to shoot for is to be a master in 6 of these areas. You get to choose those 6 of the areas. We want you to be specialist in most of those, meaning you can do most of those on your own. And the ones you don't like, everybody doesn't like everything at all times. And everyone's not going to be a master in everything. I think that's ludicrous to think that everybody is going to be a master in every single thing that they approach. As opposed to telling the kids like, look, we think these things are important. You should have a basic understanding of those. But there are some things that you're going to have affinity towards. And those are the things that are going to drive you towards life. Yep. Just like you and I are in education. We're not engineers, for example. That could have been our passion, but it's not our passion.
Are there any specific areas that you want all students to demonstrate mastery in before graduating from TGS?
I mean, yes and no. I mean, not necessarily. I think, the way the targets are set up and the way that we're promoting this with kids is that they get to choose. And that's one of the things I think that is sorely missing from education in general, is that kids really aren't given a choice. We spend a lot of time working on kids' deficiencies as opposed to recognizing that they have really God-given strengths that they should be pushing really hard. There's been a lot of recent work in human resource development in the business world that says spending time working on people's weaknesses is a waste of time. You really should find the right match with the strengths that a person has and promoting those. And those actually get you more bang for the buck and also make the employee feel worthwhile. And so what we want to do is say, look, you have to get to a certain level on all these different subjects, but you're not going to become a master in that. And that's going to be based on, consultation with us as your mentors, and consultation with your parents, and consultation with where you want to go in life. Like if you really want to be an engineer, there's no way you're going to get away from advanced mathematics. It's just not going to happen. So if that's not one of your passions and you want to be an engineer, then we need to have a conversation saying that might not be the best choice for you. Or we convince you to say, look, if you want to really be an engineer, you need to master calculus before you graduate. And that's just the non-negotiable kind of thing as what's going to happen. So I think we spend a lot more time advising, a lot more time consulting with kids, and really trying to find out who they are and where they want to put their mark on the world. That's not done so much in most schools. Most schools kids sit for 50 to an hour and a half in a block and then walk out the room, and the teachers really don't personalize the instruction. And I really want to highlight that personalized instruction is not about putting the kid into a sophisticated environment in front of a computer with the right algorithm. That's not what we're talking about. Personalized instruction is really trying to find the spark that makes that kid tick. And honestly, at this point in time in our technology, that's only done through conversation, human to human.
Yep. Personalized instruction is personal.
Yes, it's personal. Mm-hmm. And it's that give and take between mentor pushing the student and student pushing the mentor. And so right now, technology is not at a point where a computer can do that. Can it get to that point? I don't know.
And we don't want it to. I mean,
I think that's the art of being the teacher. That's the thing that we really should be honing our craft at, is those kind of guided instructions. That's the thing that leaders in institutions really should be focusing on, is developing that skill set with teachers to really push those envelopes with kids on what they want to do and what they want to become, as opposed to this one size fits all kind of mentality.
Yep. Give them a chance to pursue their passions, love learning, develop new skills, level up, all of it.
Absolutely.
Jake, it was really good talking to you. We could talk about 20 other things, but
we could.
This one now. Thanks for joining. It was
you
good
bet.
to chat.